Welcome back to the Better Health Now podcast. We're excited to have Champ Crocker, Cullman District Attorney, here today as part of our Child Safety series. This is a series that's going to come out all over the summer, all this in the summer time frame, kind of talking about a variety of different topics. Today, we're going to be talking about ATV and boating safety. To get us started, talk a little bit about some of the requirements in Alabama for driving an ATV or a boat.
Well, thank you for having me here. First of all, in the district attorney's office, we facilitate the child death review team. So whenever there is some sort of death of a child outside of a clinical setting where, say, the coroner was involved, and it may or may not involve a crime, but the district attorney assembles the information about all of these things. And unfortunately, in the 3 years that I have been in this role, we have seen cases involving ATV deaths. We've seen cases involving boating deaths. And so it's very important, I think, that we're having this conversation because it's summertime. Kids are out of school. People are going to the lake. They're going to the beach. They're having family gatherings. And all of those things are great. But I hope that through this podcast and through this episode, that it will cause people to be a little bit safer and do what they're required to do under Alabama law, which may also keep them from getting injured or worse. And ATVs and boats are two big things during summertime.
And both have sort of different requirements too, or like different expectations, kind of based on the law itself. And I think sometimes maybe people maybe get them misunderstood a little bit and kind of think either they have the same or that maybe one is less, there's not as much requirements as the other. And so this conversation hopefully kind of sets the stage for people listening of like, oh, I didn't realize that, or I didn't know that there was all these requirements involved with it.
Right. The important thing with both ATVs and boats is to remember that these things can be dangerous if you mishandle them. Okay. An ATV is not a toy. A boat is not a toy. They're both inherently dangerous, just like our cars. People drive every day, they get used to it, and maybe they sometimes don't think about how inherently dangerous that automobile is. But when you think about it, you have this machine that is capable of going very fast. Okay. It's mostly made of metal. It has got safety equipment in it, though, to keep you safe through airbags and seat belts and object detection and things like that. But it's inherently dangerous, but it's something that we all do every day. And I think people should look at ATVs and boats as the same way. Yeah, these things can be great. You can have a lot of fun with them, but they're also inherently dangerous. Now, as far as what is required, I can just unpack these one by one. With ATVs, there are less rules than there are for boats. Okay, with ATVs, if they're on private property, there really isn't a license requirement or an age requirement, or the things that someone would have with a motorcycle out on the highway. ATVs are largely used on farms and pastures and woods and on private property, and so it's important for adults and kids both to know what they should do. I mean, number one, having the proper equipment, having helmets, having gloves, keeping your legs covered, things of that nature. And those things can help you if you get thrown off. Going a proper speed, not going somewhere that you're not familiar with. Now, when we get into requirements as far as age, there are a lot of ATV trails, a lot of ATV parks that are run either privately or through public entities. Those places may have their own requirements about helmets and age and things of that nature, but it's important for people to use good sense even if they're on their private property. Yes, the law doesn't say that your 10-year-old can't ride an ATV in your pasture, but it's still important to be safe. And I can tell you, having served on the child death review team and reviewed some cases where safety wasn't the priority that it should have been, I just want to make that point. Now, boating is also can be very dangerous. Uh, you can get a boating license at the age of 12,
Hmm.
but a 12-year-old has to be supervised by an adult in order to get a boating license. You have to be 14 to drive a boat without supervision, and that is, if you're properly licensed. And there are a couple of websites that I would like to give out to people that may be helpful. For ATV, it is atvsafety.org, atvsafety.org, and this website has got some really good resources, some really good safety material on it. Actually has some links to some ATV safety courses.
Mm.
So even though Alabama law may not require you to do those, it certainly is worthwhile for parents, kids both, to know, about safety and how to operate these things, but before they get on them. So I would encourage everyone to look at atvsafety.org. For boating, there is a website where you can get your boater's license. There's an online course. It's called boat-ed.com, boat-ed.com. You can go on there. I think it's like $40. You don't have to be, on the water and, in person. When you get your driver's license, you have to go down to the courthouse and drive a vehicle and parallel park, which I always struggled with when I was 16. It's not that way for boating, but there is the online course where you can go on and do that, and I would encourage everyone to do so.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to have the links in the episode notes. So if you didn't catch it at that moment, just go to just go to the show notes, and those links will be there. What's interesting is you talked a little bit about the ATVs, kind of on private property. I think that's a lot of people think about ATVs. They think about, like on their own property, trails, friends, stuff like that. Talk a little bit about, and I think maybe maybe the misconception, or maybe what people aren't aware of, is what happens once you take that ATV onto maybe a public road, even if it's just crossing and there was to be an accident of some kind. Like, what sort of laws and restrictions does that come into place for people within ATVs? Because there is a lot of, kind of that, just trying to traverse from one maybe area to another.
So ATVs are not street legal. You can't drive them on public roads. Now, exceptions can be made if you are crossing the road. I don't think any police officer is going to give someone a ticket for crossing a road if they're, say, there's an intersection with a trail. But as far as, getting on the road and driving it, then that's illegal in Alabama.
Yeah. And so as we kind of look at, I mean, there's a wide assortment of ATVs, and kind of like also looking at kind of the boating aspect too. The main safety of obviously ATVs, helmets are, I mean, hugely important for any rider at any age. And then from a boating perspective, life jackets. Talk a little bit about maybe some sort of the safety features that are best for children when you think about life jackets, as far as, you're bringing your family on a boat, and you need to make sure you have the equipment prepared for every member, no matter if they're, young and 2, 3, 4 years old, to even the older participants on the boat.
Right. So generally speaking, life jackets are required if you're on a boat. Now, if you're in an interior cabin area, then maybe not. But if you're out on a boat on the water, you got to have a life jacket on. It's important when it comes to kids to check the weight of the life jacket. Okay. There are different size life jackets, and you wouldn't want a 50-pound life jacket for a 100-pound child.
Mm.
And so it's always important to make sure that the life jackets you have are life jackets that fit those kids. And you got to check that before you take off and be sure.
Yeah, and a lot of the boating activities isn't just being on a boat and just kind of enjoying the water and enjoying the lake. It's the other activities that come along with that sometimes add. There's some safety concerns that maybe parents should have when they think about skiing, or tubing, or other sort of water activities. Talk a little bit about maybe some of the other safety things that should come into play when thinking about doing some of these activities on a boat.
Well, having time and space is the most important thing. With boating, there are rules of the road, just like there are for motor vehicles on the highway. and those are listed in the Alabama code, and I brought those with me today. But probably the most important one, if I was going to pick one, is keeping a proper lookout and seeing what is there to be seen. Okay. Another big one is to make sure that your watercraft has a kill switch in it. Okay. A kill switch, it's usually a lanyard
Mm.
that will connect maybe to go around your wrist or around your neck, that if the operator of that watercraft is thrown overboard, it will kill the switch and turn the engine off. And there are state requirements for that, and there are federal requirements for that. The federal requirements are actually a little stricter than the state of Alabama requirements, depending on the size and the horsepower of the boat. But um, one of the things that happens is if a boat becomes unmanned, say for example the operator gets thrown overboard, boats will typically go in a circle fashion, and that presents a danger if you're in the water.
Mm.
And just over Memorial Day weekend, I read about a situation that happened in Demopolis, Alabama, where a 70-year-old man was out in a boat by himself, and he got thrown overboard. The boat was still going, and he ended up suffering fatal injuries from
Mhm.
that. Not saying that people shouldn't go out by themselves, but if you are gonna go out by yourself in a boat, it's you really wanna have a kill switch, because that's true for not just you as the operator, but also if you've got passengers of your boat, and you have to, turn that engine off in a hurry, you wanna be able to do that. You don't want that machinery still going while people are close and in the water.
Yeah, and so kind of we looked at kind of the things to look at from the boating perspective, kind of bringing us back a little bit to ATV as we kind of are wrapping up the kind of the conversation. Talk a little bit about maybe taking passengers on an ATV, like having riders with you, and maybe the different. Obviously, there's all types of different ATVs. Some are maybe more appropriate for a younger age to be on versus a higher horsepower that would be a little bit more difficult to handle. Kind of what does that variations look like, and what is sort of the best practices that people can put into place to ensure safety, not only amongst just maybe the rider themselves, but amongst if they are to take passengers with them.
So when it comes to ATVs, these are usually single or double rider
Mm,
vehicles, and they have handlebars on them. Think of a four wheeler.
mm,
Okay, you should never have more people on that four wheeler than it's designed for. If it's a single rider, only one person
mm.
should be driving it. If it's a double rider, then you sure don't need three or four. Okay, but then there are all kinds of other vehicles that sort of fall under this same category, like side by sides and things of that nature. Some of these have seat belts in them and other safety features, and it's important to utilize those. You don't want to overload them either, because some of those can get up to high rates of speed, and you want to make sure that if you're operating one of those, that taking you're not taking turns too fast. You're not, operating it in such a way that would endanger the passengers.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's easy to think, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna go around the corner, I'm just going here," but I think, making sure that no matter what you're, operating, that you're operating it within its guidelines, that it's recommended and not going above that and not creating a chance for something bad to happen.
Yeah, I think it goes back to maybe we sometimes get lulled into complacency
Mm,
by driving our cars, which have all the safety features that I mentioned. Uh, you don't have those on a four wheeler. You don't have those in a side by side. And if you're involved in a major collision, then there's more exposure there, which is why being careful and being situationally aware is always key.
yeah, and so before we talk about an event that actually happened a day or so ago of this recording, is there anything else you would wanna leave somebody with about the boating and ATV conversation before we dive into kind of a recent event here in Coleman
I
County?
I would just say when it comes to boating, and just because of some things that have happened, in this community, to remember the boating rules of the road. They're online. It's good to review them. Things like, staying to the right in a narrow channel, not creating unnecessary wake, in certain areas. And even though there isn't necessarily a speed limit, a posted speed limit
Mhm.
on the water like you have on the roadway, there is always a duty to go a reasonable and prudent speed under the circumstances. And especially on big holidays like 4th of July, for
Mm.
example, there's going to be a lot of people in the water, a lot of people boating, a lot of people fishing, a lot of people jet skiing. It's important to take that into account, when it comes to speed, because what's a prudent speed when no one else is out there versus what it would be on a heavy day, could be vastly different.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about a recent event that happened on Memorial Day here in Coleman County, and kind of highlight a little bit about just the community involvement and kind of their responsiveness to this situation.
Well, one of the things that makes Cullman County a special place to live is the people here, and how the people in Cullman County step up for their fellow citizens. And so on Memorial Day, there was a situation where a 3-year-old child had gone missing, had wandered off, and this was in a wooded area out in the county. And the weather that day was awful, pouring down rain, storming. There was flash flooding, just very rough weather conditions. And this child was missing for several hours, and I was monitoring the situation, and there were a huge number of deputies, city police officers who were out there, some of which weren't even on shift, who came out to help try to find this child. And then, a call was made for all the volunteer fire departments to come and assist. I am a volunteer firefighter at Gold Ridge Fire Department, and I went to the scene, and then also the public was invited to come and help. And, that afternoon, I was there at the command post. There were several investigators and officers out looking in the woods, but there were probably 100 people gathered around this command post getting ready to go back out. And these are people who came there on a holiday in the rain for a child they didn't know, willing to help. And then the call came through that the child had been found safely, and there was, you can imagine the cheering and clapping and celebrating that went on by everyone there, that this child had been found. And I think it just says a lot about Cullman County that people are willing to show up and do things like that to help their fellow citizens, and that's, one of many reasons why I'm proud to serve, the people in this county.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk today a little bit about the ATV and boating safety. I think the
Sure.
timing of this episode coming out, we want people to be out, able to have fun in the summer, and but have fun and be safe. And so I think conversations like this are need to be had to educate and inform. We'll be sure to have everything in the episode notes, links to some of the stuff you address. So if you want to find out more, you have questions, you're interested in getting a boating license, and you want to kind of go through those steps and processes, links will be below. But I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me.